17 days before my sister's wedding, my parents sent me a list of 5 things I had to do if I wanted to sit in that ballroom. Drop every complaint I had against her. Sign away my rights to a house our grandmother left us. Hand over $25,000 and stand up in front of everyone and apologize for hurting the family. My father ended the message with one line: "Complete all 5 and we'll let you come." I read it twice. Then I noticed something else. Attached to that email was a document they expected me to sign before midnight, as if a deadline could scare me into agreeing. It didn't scare me. It did something else. It made everything click into place. Because 6 months earlier, I had found a loan taken out against that same house, the one our grandmother left to my sister and me together, with a rule that both of us had to sign off on anything major. $240,000, borrowed against a property I co-owned, with my signature on the paperwork. A signature I never wrote. When I asked my sister about it, she didn't deny using the money. She leaned across my desk and told me I owned half of something valuable, and she needed me to act like family. That was the moment I understood the 5 conditions weren't really about the wedding. They were about making sure I stayed quiet about a debt that wasn't mine. So I said no. All 5, no. And instead of fighting about it over the phone, I booked a beach suite 3 time zones away from that ballroom, and I called a courier about one last gift for the bride. The box I sent looked expensive enough for a wedding my sister had turned into a show for 300 guests. She'd already arranged for the wedding coordinator to announce every gift out loud before the ceremony, mine included. She was expecting jewelry, or cash, or the apology she demanded. What she got instead was a folder of bank records, a voice recording of her own words, and a signature analysis proving the one on that loan wasn't mine. I wasn't in that ballroom when she opened it, but I watched every second of what happened next. Watching from where? Please comment. My name is Claire Bennett, and I am 34 years old, and 17 days before my younger sister's wedding, my parents sent me an email listing 5 conditions I had to meet if I wanted a seat in the ballroom. I had to withdraw every financial complaint I had against her, sign a confidentiality agreement, give up my claim to our grandmother's property, pay $25,000 toward the wedding, and read a public apology for damaging the family's unity. At the bottom, my father had typed one line: "Complete all 5, and we'll let you come." I read the message twice. Then I noticed the attachment waiting underneath, a document they expected me to sign before midnight. They thought the deadline would rattle me into agreeing. Instead, it made everything clear. I typed 4 words, declined every single condition, and sent my reply. Then I booked a beachfront suite in Malibu for the wedding weekend and called a courier about one last gift. The box I had shipped looked elegant enough for a bride who had turned her wedding into a show for 300 guests. Inside, though, was something she had spent 2 years making sure no one would ever find. I knew she'd open it in front of everyone, because she'd already told the wedding coordinator to announce every expensive gift from important family members out loud. What she didn't know was that my gift held no jewelry, no money, and no apology. It held a timeline, a voice recording, and a document carrying a signature that looked exactly like mine, but wasn't. Before I get to what she said and what happened after that box was opened, I'm curious about something. What time is it where you are right now? Where are you watching from, and what's the weather like there? I want to see how far a story like this can travel. The first person I need to tell you about is my younger sister, Vanessa. For most of our lives, our parents treated her mistakes like emergencies that somebody else had to fix. In public, she was warm and quick with compliments, the kind of person people wanted to be around. At home, though, she measured relationships by what they could do for her. When she needed a deposit for college, I lent her the money. When she quit a marketing job after 6 months, I helped rebuild her resume and covered 2 months of her rent. When she started a luxury event planning company, I introduced her to 3 clients from my accounting firm. Every favor came with the same promise: she'd pay me back once things settled down. Things never settled down. The promises just kept changing shape. Our grandmother had noticed the pattern long before anyone else would admit it. When she passed, she left a restored coastal property called Mariner's Point to Vanessa and me, split evenly, with a strict rule: any loan, sale, or major renovation needed both of our signatures. The house meant a lot to us emotionally, but it also brought in steady income, hosting small weddings and corporate retreats. I managed the finances. Vanessa handled marketing. That worked fine until she got engaged to a restaurant developer named Ryan Cole. He was thoughtful, successful, and completely convinced that Vanessa had built her company on her own, without any family money behind her. I didn't dislike him. If anything, that made things worse. 6 months before the wedding, I spotted a loan payment in the Mariners Point ledger that I'd never approved. The lender's description was vague, so I asked Vanessa about it. She laughed it off, calling it a temporary line of credit for renovations. I asked to see the loan file. She stalled. My parents told me not to stir up tension before the wedding. Then the lender finally sent a partial copy of the paperwork, and there it was. A commercial loan for $240,000, secured against the property, carrying what looked like my electronic signature. I had never seen that document. I had never approved that loan. When I confronted Vanessa privately, she didn't deny using the money. She said the wedding costs had ballooned, her company had cash flow trouble, and Ryan's new restaurant needed a bridge investment. Then she leaned across my desk and said, "You own half of something valuable. I needed you to act like family." I told her a forged signature wasn't a family favor. She rolled her eyes and accused me of being jealous that she was getting married first. That night, my mother called to say Vanessa had made a technical mistake that could be fixed if I signed retroactive consent. My father followed up with a message about how embarrassing an investigation would be for everyone. I refused. 2 weeks later, the 5 conditions arrived. The confidentiality agreement wasn't really about wedding behavior. Buried on page 6 was language releasing Vanessa, my parents, their companies, and the lender from any claims connected to past financial decisions. The public apology wasn't about making peace. It was designed to make me look unstable before I ever had the chance to challenge that forged loan. The $25,000 contribution would help cover money already missing from the property account, and giving up my share of Mariners Point would hand Vanessa full control of the collateral. For the first time, I saw those conditions as a coordinated plan, not just a pile of insults. They weren't offering me a seat at the wedding. They were asking me to erase the evidence against them while I smiled for photos. I sent everything to my attorney, then called my closest friend, Sophie Hart. I'd known Sophie since graduate school, and she was the only person who'd warned me years earlier that loyalty without limits eventually turns into unpaid labor. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she asked me one question. Did I want to be understood, or did I want to be protected? I said both. She told me I might have to pick which one came first. Protection came first. That night, I placed a fraud alert on my credit, requested the full loan file, and had my attorney notify the lender that my signature was in dispute. Then I booked the trip to Malibu. The vacation was real. I needed distance from the wedding and from the version of myself my family expected to show up on command. But the gift was real too. Vanessa had spent months planning an elaborate pre-ceremony presentation where certain relatives would give blessings and expensive gifts before the doors opened for the vows. She'd even emailed me twice, asking for a heartfelt family tribute to play on the ballroom screen. I decided to give her exactly that, a record of what our family had become, put together with the same precision I'd use on a forensic audit. I wasn't planning to yell, interrupt, or beg anyone to believe me. I planned to let the dates, the transfers, the signatures, and Vanessa's own words speak in the room I'd been ordered to enter quietly. 3 days later, I was in Malibu with Sophie, sitting at a narrow table covered in bank statements, loan documents, property records, and color-coded notes. I could see the ocean through the window, but I barely looked at it. Every hour turned up another fact that made the 5 conditions feel less like family pressure and more like an attempted cover-up. The complete loan file arrived first. My supposed electronic signature had been submitted from an internet address tied to Vanessa's office. The security questions had been answered using details only close family would know: my first employer's name, the street we grew up on, and the month our grandmother died. The lender had also received a copy of my driver's license. I remembered handing that to my mother the year before, after she told me the family's insurance agent needed updated records. When I called her, she swore she had no idea how Vanessa got hold of it. Her answer came too fast. Sophie watched my face as I hung up. "You don't believe her," she said. I told her I honestly didn't know what I believed anymore. That was the part no one warns you about. Finding out you've been betrayed doesn't instantly make you brave. It makes you question every ordinary memory attached to the people who did it. I thought about my mother bringing me soup when I was sick, my father teaching me to drive, Vanessa sleeping on my floor after a bad breakup. Those good memories didn't vanish just because they'd been used to get close to me. They just felt contaminated now, which was somehow worse. I opened the property account and traced where the loan money went. $90,000 to Vanessa's event company. $68,000 transferred to a vendor called Cole Hospitality Design, tied to Ryan's restaurant project. $42,000 toward wedding deposits. Another $27,000 routed through my parents' consulting business before coming back to Vanessa labeled as a family gift. The rest had gone to fees and overdue bills. The money going to Ryan's company bothered me most, since the transfer description made it look like an investment he probably believed came from Vanessa herself. I didn't know yet whether he was involved or just being used. Then Sophie found the first real twist. Hidden in a shared archive was a spreadsheet showing projected ownership of Mariners Point after the wedding. Vanessa had listed herself as sole controller, Ryan as a future investor, and me under a column labeled Released Interest. The date on it was 2 months before my parents sent their 5 conditions. Next to my name, Vanessa had written, "Will sign to keep her invitation." I stared at that line until the words blurred together. She hadn't just hoped I'd agree. She'd calculated it. My lifelong habit of avoiding family embarrassment had become a line item on her spreadsheet. I wanted to call her right then and tell her I'd seen everything, but Sophie stopped me. "She's been planning around your reactions," she said. "Don't give her a new one to plan around." We kept digging. Buried in an old voice message thread was a recording Vanessa had sent after a few drinks at a business conference. At the time, I'd written it off as one of her usual late-night complaints. Now it sounded completely different. She said our parents were finally handling me, that once I signed the wedding papers, the loan would be too shared to challenge, and that Ryan never needed to know where the restaurant money actually came from, because he'd pay it back once the place opened. Her tone was light, almost bored. At the end, she laughed and said, "She'll be mad for a month, then she'll fix it like she always does." I played that message twice. The second time, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt ashamed, because part of me recognized the pattern just as clearly as she had. I'd bailed Vanessa out with creditors, employers, ex-friends, and our parents' disappointment more times than I could count. I'd called that love, because admitting it was really fear would have meant changing sooner than I was ready to. That recognition became the heart of the gift. I didn't want the presentation to dig up embarrassing childhood stories. I wanted it to lay out a chain of adult decisions: the forged signature, the diverted funds, the fake release, the plan to keep Ryan in the dark, and my parents' effort to force my cooperation. Sophie and I built a 12-minute video using nothing but documents that could be verified. No dramatic music, no insults. Each screen showed a date, an amount, and where it came from. The final slide read, "A wedding cannot create trust where fraud was used to manufacture consent." I also put together 3 sealed folders. One, addressed to Ryan, held the full paper trail connected to his restaurant. One, addressed to my parents, held a notice from my attorney demanding they preserve all records. The last, addressed to Vanessa, held a copy of the 5 conditions, my 4-word refusal, and a formal demand that she repay the stolen funds and give up her management access to Mariners Point. On top, I left a handwritten note. "You asked for a public apology. This is the public accounting." Sophie read it and said it felt cold. I told her cold was safer than cruel. The gift wasn't going to invent any consequences. It was only going to remove the secrecy that had kept real consequences from ever reaching her. Still, as I sealed the box, I wondered whether handing the truth to 300 people counted as justice or as punishment. I didn't have a clean answer. I only knew every private conversation so far had ended in pressure, denial, or another document shoved in my direction. Public image was the shield Vanessa valued most. If I wanted her to stop hiding behind it, I had to put the facts somewhere image couldn't replace them. The next problem was getting it there. I wasn't going to sneak into the wedding, pose as a vendor, or have someone secretly film the guests. Vanessa had already built the opening I needed herself. Her planner had sent every close relative a schedule for a legacy gift ceremony, A 40-minute event before the vows where select presents would be opened on camera for a live stream of remote guests. Vanessa had designed it to show off the life she wanted everyone to admire. My name was still printed beside the final slot on the program, labeled Sisters Tribute Video. My parents had clearly assumed I'd cave before the deadline. I emailed the planner and told her I wouldn't be attending, but I would still honor my scheduled tribute. I attached the video, gave her the tracking number for the box, and asked for written confirmation that the sealed folders would stay inside until Vanessa opened it herself. The planner wrote back that Vanessa had personally asked her to feature my contribution, since family reconciliation was part of the wedding story. The irony was so exact, I nearly laughed. My attorney reviewed every item before it shipped. She also sent the lender a formal affidavit disputing the signature and requested an immediate freeze on any further draws against Mariner's Point. We didn't ask the bank to make any announcement during the wedding. We didn't need to. Once the fraud report was filed, Vanessa would lose access to the remaining credit, and the lender would contact every guarantor listed on the loan. At 9:12 the next morning, my father called. He skipped the hello. "What did you tell the bank?" he demanded. I said I'd told them the truth. He warned me that contractors, vendors, and Ryan's restaurant could all be hurt by this. I asked him why my forged signature had been acceptable when the only person getting hurt by it was supposed to be me. He said, "This is bigger than one signature." That sentence told me more than he meant it to. I asked if he'd known. He went quiet for 4 seconds, then said my mother had only handed over identification because Vanessa promised the paperwork was temporary. I wrote down the time of his admission on a legal pad. "You let her use my license," I said. He answered that parents sometimes make hard choices to keep a family together. I told him a family held together by unauthorized debt was already broken. He lowered his voice and offered a new deal. Sign the release, show up quietly, and he'd get Vanessa to repay me over 5 years. I asked what would guarantee those payments. He said trust. I ended the call. My mother tried a different approach. She sent old photos of Vanessa as a little girl, then wrote that whatever I decided would define me forever. I almost answered. Instead, I forwarded her messages to my attorney and turned off my notifications. That evening, Vanessa called from a number I didn't recognize. Her first words were, "Do you have any idea what you're threatening?" She claimed the loan was almost paid off, that Ryan would be humiliated, and that our parents could lose their business. Then her tone softened. She said she wanted me next to her at the wedding, and that sisters shouldn't let paperwork ruin a once-in-a-lifetime day. I asked her to say plainly whether she'd signed my name. She paused, then said, "I did what everyone needed." Sophie, sitting across from me, heard it on speaker. Vanessa kept going. "You always land on your feet. I needed one thing to be mine." There it was. Not remorse, just entitlement dressed up as pain. I told her the box was already on its way. She shouted my name and demanded to know what was inside. I said, "Everything you were sure I'd keep private." After the call, my hands were shaking so badly I spilled water across the table. Sophie didn't congratulate me. She just helped me clean it up. The next morning, we checked into the Malibu suite I'd booked, and I set my phone next to the livestream link. I didn't feel powerful. I felt like I'd stepped onto a bridge after setting fire to the road behind me. At 4 o'clock California time, the legacy gift ceremony would begin in a ballroom 3 time zones away. At 3:47, the planner sent one message. "Your package is on the presentation table. The bride wants yours opened last." Vanessa still believed she could control how this ended. The live stream opened on a wide shot of the ballroom. White orchids climbed the columns, candles covered every table, and a gold monogram of Vanessa and Ryan's initials glowed behind the stage. I could hear more than 300 guests talking while servers moved through the crowd with champagne. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then the coordinator welcomed everyone to the private celebration before the vows and explained that the couple wanted to honor the families who'd made the day possible. Sophie sat beside me on the sofa, and neither of us said a word. One by one, relatives came forward. Ryan's parents presented an antique watch. My aunt gave Vanessa our grandmother's pearl comb. My parents announced they were contributing toward the couple's future home. Every gift got applause and another carefully staged photo. Vanessa looked radiant. If my phone call had scared her, she hid it well. When the coordinator reached the final item, my mother leaned over and whispered something to Vanessa. Vanessa shook her head. The coordinator smiled at the camera and said, "Our last tribute comes from the bride's sister Claire, who couldn't be with us today, but sent something especially meaningful." A murmur ran through the room. Vanessa stood before anyone could stop her. "My sister and I have had our differences," she said, wearing the soft, wounded look she always used to earn sympathy. "But I believe today is about forgiveness." Applause followed. My father didn't clap. The box was carried onto the stage, walnut, polished, tied with an ivory ribbon. Vanessa glanced toward the livestream camera as if she were looking straight at me. "Whatever she sent," she said, "I accept it with love." She lifted the lid. On top sat a silver frame holding a photo of Vanessa and me as teenagers at Mariner's Point. Underneath it was an envelope labeled, "Read Aloud." She smiled, clearly expecting an apology, and handed it to the coordinator. He unfolded the single page. His expression changed after the first line. Vanessa reached for it, but he'd already read enough for the microphone to carry the words across the room. "To my sister. You asked me to give up my legal claims, my property interest, my silence, and $25,000 in exchange for permission to attend your wedding. I said no, because consent taken under pressure isn't consent at all." The ballroom went still. My mother rose from her chair. Vanessa grabbed the letter and scanned the rest. "Turn off the microphone," she whispered. The coordinator looked toward the planner, unsure what to do. Then the ballroom screen changed. The tribute video started automatically at the time listed in the program. The first slide showed the 5 conditions exactly as my parents had sent them. The second highlighted the release language buried on page 6. Guests started reading along. Ryan stepped closer to the screen. The third slide showed the $240,000 loan, the disputed signature, and the internet address tied to Vanessa's office. Ryan turned to her. "Why is Claire's name on that?" he asked. Vanessa said the document was misleading. She hurried toward the control table, but the planner blocked her, saying the presentation had been approved under Vanessa's own written instructions. The video moved to the transfer chart. $90,000 to her company, $42,000 to wedding deposits, $68,000 to Ryan's restaurant project. His face changed the moment he saw his business listed. "You told me that money came from your retained earnings," he said. Vanessa reached for his arm. He stepped back. My father pushed toward the stage, shouting that private documents were being taken out of context. Then the recording played. Vanessa's own voice filled the ballroom. "Once Claire signs, the loan becomes too shared to challenge. Ryan never needs to know where the restaurant money started." Her laugh followed, sharper through the speakers than it had ever sounded on my laptop. Vanessa froze for a second. No one moved. Then she screamed, "Shut it off! Shut it off now!" It wasn't fear of anything hidden in the box. It was the terror of hearing her own private certainty become public evidence. She grabbed the silver frame, threw it onto the table, and knocked over a vase. Ryan opened the folder addressed to him. Inside was the complete transaction trail and a letter from my attorney advising him to get independent legal counsel before combining any assets or signing a marriage license. He read the first page, then looked at Vanessa like he was seeing her for the first time. On the screen, the final slide appeared. "This presentation has also been provided to the lender and to legal counsel. No one in this room is being asked to choose a side. You are being asked to look at the record." Then the video ended. No music, no dramatic photo, just a black screen and the date. 3 time zones away, in a quiet Malibu suite, I watched my sister realize the story she'd built for that room no longer belonged to her. For several seconds after the screen went dark, the ballroom stayed silent. Then everyone seemed to talk at once. Ryan's father pulled him aside. My aunt asked my mother if the conditions were real. 2 of Vanessa's business clients started for the exit, photographing the transfer chart on their way out. The planner cut the live stream's public audio, but a private backup link she'd sent me earlier kept running, so I could still see the stage. Vanessa was crying now, not quietly. She pointed at the box and told the room I'd made everything up because I couldn't stand seeing her happy. My mother rushed to her side, repeating that the documents lacked context. My father grabbed the microphone and asked the guests to be patient with a temporary family misunderstanding. That phrase used up whatever patience Ryan had left. He walked to the center of the stage, holding the folder addressed to him, and asked Vanessa one direct question. "Did you authorize the transfer into my company without telling me where the money came from?" She said she'd only been trying to help him. He asked if she'd forged my signature. She said I would have approved the loan eventually. He asked if my parents had known. My mother started answering for her, but Ryan raised his hand and said, "I asked Vanessa." Vanessa looked around the room like she was searching for someone to rescue her. For the first time, nobody stepped up. She finally admitted she'd completed the online signature herself because a lender deadline was approaching. She insisted the property was valuable enough that the loan was harmless, and that I'd always resented her success. Ryan turned another page. "This says you plan to transfer Claire's ownership to yourself after she signed a release. Was that harmless too?" Vanessa's face hardened. The tears stopped. She told him marriage required loyalty, and that he should be defending her instead of questioning her in front of strangers. He said, "These aren't strangers. These are witnesses." My father moved toward him, warning him not to make a decision he couldn't undo. Ryan, clearly shaken, said the permanent decision had already been made the moment his business got funded with money he hadn't questioned. He pulled the wedding ring out of his pocket, never worn since the vows hadn't happened yet, and set the box down on the table. "There will be no ceremony today," he said. The room gasped. Vanessa grabbed his jacket and begged him to reconsider. He stepped away and asked security to take him to a private room where he could speak with his attorney and business partners. My mother shouted that I'd destroyed the wedding. Right then, the planner walked up to the microphone and announced there was a video call request from me on the presentation system. I hadn't planned to appear. Ryan had texted Sophie through the number listed in my attorney's letter and asked if I'd answer 3 questions. Sophie looked at me. I almost said no. Then I thought about how many times my family had talked about me while making sure I couldn't speak for myself. I said yes. My face appeared on a small side screen. The ballroom quieted again. I could see Vanessa staring up at me, her makeup streaked, her fury now stronger than her panic. Ryan asked if I'd ever authorized the loan. "No," I said. He asked if I'd approved the transfer into his company. "No." He asked if I'd wanted the wedding canceled. "No." I disputed my signature and shared where the money came from. "What you do with that is your decision." Vanessa shouted that I was pretending to be innocent after timing the whole thing for maximum humiliation. I told her she was right about one thing. I had chosen a public setting. I'd done it because every private conversation had ended in pressure or denial, and because she'd planned to use my silence as proof the family stood behind her. "You wanted my apology on that screen," I said. "You wanted the room to witness a lie. I gave them the documents instead." My father told the technician to cut the call. Ryan said, "Let her finish." I didn't give a speech. I looked at my parents and asked if they'd given Vanessa my driver's license. My mother covered her mouth. My father said it had been a mistake. I asked if they'd read the release before demanding I sign it. He said their attorney had assured them it would prevent a lawsuit. That admission landed harder than anything I could have accused them of. My aunt turned to my mother and said, "You knew this was never about wedding behavior." My mother started crying, saying they'd been afraid that if the loan collapsed, Vanessa's business, Ryan's restaurant, and Mariner's Point would all go down together. I said, "So you decided I should fail quietly instead?" No one argued with that. Then Vanessa said the thing that ended any sympathy left in the room. She shouted, "Because you could afford it." The words carried across the ballroom. She kept going before anyone could stop her. I had a successful company, no wedding expenses, and no kids depending on me, so it would have cost her less to absorb the debt than it would have cost me to lose everything. Ryan stared at her. My parents stared at the floor. In one sentence, she'd confirmed the belief behind every one of those 5 conditions, that my stability made me an acceptable target. I told her that having money didn't turn theft into sharing. Then I ended the call. What happened after that reached me through messages over the next hour. Ryan left with his parents and told the officiant not to sign or submit any marriage license. His business partner froze all spending tied to the disputed investment. The lender suspended the Mariner's Point credit line and notified every guarantor on file. Two of Vanessa's clients canceled their contracts before the ballroom had even emptied out. The venue demanded immediate payment for the remaining balance, but the card Vanessa handed over was declined, since it drew from the now frozen property account. My father ended up paying the emergency balance out of his own savings to avoid a lawsuit from the venue. Vanessa refused to leave the bridal suite until security told her the booking ended at midnight. By then, the flowers, the band, the custom dinner, and the monogrammed stage were still sitting there for a wedding that no longer existed. I didn't celebrate. I closed my laptop and walked out onto the balcony. The ocean below was black except where the moonlight caught the surface. Sophie stood beside me without saying anything. I'd wanted the truth to create consequences. I hadn't expected those consequences to feel so much like grief. The investigation took 7 months. The lender's records confirmed that Vanessa had used my personal information from her own office, and that my mother had sent the license copy from her email account. My parents avoided criminal charges by cooperating, handing over documents, and admitting their part in the attempted release. That cooperation didn't shield them from the financial fallout, though. Their consulting business had received $27,000 from the loan, so the lender treated them as participants in an unauthorized transaction. They sold their lake condo, drained most of their retirement savings, and paid a substantial settlement toward the property debt. My father stepped down from 2 nonprofit boards after the dispute became public. My mother stopped speaking to several relatives who wouldn't describe what happened as anything other than Claire's revenge. Vanessa faced the heaviest consequences of all. Her event planning company collapsed within 3 months once clients stopped trusting her with their deposits. Ryan permanently called off the engagement and returned every gift he could track down. His restaurant project only survived after he replaced the disputed funds with a legitimate investment and signed an agreement separating his business from any of Vanessa's claims. He sent me one letter, thanking me for the documents and apologizing for benefiting from money he hadn't looked into carefully enough. I believed him, but I didn't let him become part of my life. Some endings don't need a new friendship built onto the end of them. Eventually, Vanessa accepted a plea agreement covering fraud and identity misuse. She received a suspended sentence, supervised probation, and a restitution order large enough to follow her for years. She also had to transfer her share of Mariner's Point into a court-supervised trust until the debt was resolved. I became the temporary manager, not because I wanted to win the property, but because someone had to rebuild the records and get the business running again. Within a year, the venue was profitable again. I used part of my management fee to start a small legal aid fund for people dealing with financial abuse by relatives. That gave the whole experience a purpose beyond just punishment. My relationship with my parents never recovered. They wrote letters, sent holiday cards, and asked for counseling. I agreed to 1 session. During it, my father said they'd always believed I was the strongest person in the family. I told him strength was never consent to carry everyone else's consequences. My mother apologized, but she still asked whether the public presentation had really been necessary. I answered honestly, maybe not. I could have let the lawyers handle everything privately, but privacy had protected them for years, and they'd planned to use that wedding crowd to certify a false version of events. I wasn't sorry the same crowd saw the record instead. I was only sorry none of us had stopped the pattern before a ballroom became the one place denial couldn't survive anymore. Vanessa reached out to me once, after sentencing. No greeting, just, "You got everything." I wrote back, "No, I kept what was already mine." Then I blocked the number. On the first anniversary of the canceled wedding, I went back to Malibu alone. I took out the photograph that had been sitting inside that gift box, the one of Vanessa and me at Mariner's Point, back before money and businesses and family roles hardened around us. For a moment, I missed the sister in that picture. Then I understood that missing who someone used to be doesn't mean you have to reopen the door to who they chose to become. I hadn't mailed anything dangerous. I'd mailed evidence. The terror in that room came from recognition. Vanessa had built her whole future on the assumption that I would always protect her from the truth. When that assumption failed, everything resting on top of it failed with it. Some people called what I did revenge. Others called it accountability. I still think it was both. The difference is that revenge alone would have ended with her humiliation. Accountability kept going, through restitution, through boundaries, through the work of rebuilding what her choices had damaged. So I'll ask you honestly, if your own family demanded you sign away your rights just to be allowed at a perfect celebration, would you expose the truth in public, or would you let the law handle it quietly and walk away? Thank you for spending this time with me. All names, events, and outcomes in this story are fictional, created only for entertainment and reflection. If it reminds you of anything, let it be this. When someone benefits from your loyalty but never protects your interests in return, walking away isn't betrayal. It's finally correcting an imbalance that lasted far too long.